I'd like to call the meeting to order on January 24th. Captain Williams, will you lead us in the pledge?
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Captain. Jennifer, will you please call roll?
Councilmember Bogue,
Here.
Councilmember Duncan,
Here.
Councilmember Thorpe,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Beaver,
Here.
Mayor Avila.
Here. Okay, next item on is the agenda. And Mr. Casey, do you have anything to add?
We do this
Pretty
evening,
track.
Mr. Mayor. Staff would respectfully request that the council consider adding a urgency item. This item would be required, a 4/5 vote would be required to add this to the agenda this evening. It came to our attention after the agenda was posted, and action is required before the next city council meeting. And it has to do with the update to the, hold on one second, Five Winds Ranch Kick the Dust Up Fest update. I always have trouble with that title. And the problem is hiring a band in a timely manner, and so staff's recommending that that action be added, and we'll give a staff report as the first department report if council so chooses.
Okay, and we need to make a vote on this right now to add it?
Please, yes.
Okay, is there a motion to add the urgency item to the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a first and a second. If no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It carries. Thank you. Now we're going to,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
we're going to move on to the public hearing now.
I was going to say you should also update the agenda for the public hearing to be heard now. So a vote is required to amend the agenda for that purpose.
Okay, I'd like to move up the public hearing to the next item. Is there any discussion on that, or is there a motion to move it up?
I'll move to move the item to now.
I'll second.
You have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. It is public hearing number 3, public hearing to receive input from the community regarding the City Council election district boundaries draft map, and that'll be presented by Ms. Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight's meeting is the third public hearing regarding the election district boundaries, and it is intended to inform the public about the process and to provide the members of the community an opportunity to voice any of their opinions. At this time, I'd like to introduce Jeff Simonati of NDC, who is joining us remotely this evening to discuss the draft map and to address any questions that council may have.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Jeff Simonetti, and I'm with the National Demographics Corporation. As always, we appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. And so this evening is the third public hearing, and just wanted to circle back to the second public hearing, which we walked through the current districts. And as you will recall, one of the most important things that we have to review is both population deviation as well as looking at the current demographics. And when we put together your 2020 demographic spreadsheet, so using the new Census Bureau data in the existing districts, we determined that your population deviation is 8.66%. And when we talk about population deviation, just as a reminder, that is the difference between the largest district and the smallest district as a percentage. That number can be no greater than 10%. And since you are at 8.66%, you're under the population deviation threshold that would require you to go through the redistricting process. So at the last hearing, we received direction from the council that they would like to consider keeping their current districts as is. And so tonight before you is the third public hearing to, again, bring forward as a potential draft map the existing districts. The important thing to remember is that regardless of whether you keep the existing districts or not, you have to go through the required 4 hearings that is required as a result of the Fair Maps Act. So this is the third hearing, and again, we would open it up to either questions or comments from the general public as well as the council. But if it's the direction, again, of the council to move forward with the existing districts, that can be considered this evening. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Is there any questions of staff? Okay, hearing none. Do we have any public comments?
No, sir.
Okay, none written and none online. Okay, if there's no other comments from staff, for staff and from the public, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, open it for council discussion. Anyone want to say anything?
I have nothing. I think it's the same districts that we had before, so I'm fine with that.
Do you hear a motion to accept this?
So move.
Okay,
I'll second.
we have a first and a second to accept the input. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes. Okay, next item on the agenda is employee introduction.
Mr. Mayor, before we move on, there was a third recommendation. There were three different recommendations in the staff report, and the third one was to direct staff to return to council on February 28th, 2022. I just want to make sure that that was within the scope of the motion and that that's clear. I think that was the intent of the maker of the motion, but just wanted to clarify that for the record.
Yes, it was.
That was my second as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to employee introduction. Is that for you, Captain?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm here to introduce one of our deputy sheriffs that works at the police department. Deputy Antonio Alcala attended the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, or our academy, in 2010, but was officially hired by the department in 2011. And his first job after the academy was at the West Valley Detention Center as one of our jail deputies. In 2012, he transferred to the Morongo Basin Station as a patrol deputy. And while working there, he became a field training officer, training new deputy sheriffs that come out to patrol. And he did that for several deputies while out at Morongo. In 2016, Tony was transferred to Yucaipa, where he initially worked patrol here. And then a couple of years ago, Lieutenant Porter and I were looking for a replacement deputy in our multiple enforcement team, which is our directed problem-solving team. And based on the amount of productivity that Tony was generating at the time, we selected to put him into MET, where he worked about 2 years, I think. Here recently, with some promotions and moves within the police department, we found ourselves in need of a quality of life deputy. And Lieutenant Warwick and I talked about it, discussed our various options, and ultimately decided that Tony was the right person for the job, and we selected him. It's a unique position that requires the ability to speak to elected officials, service groups, management staff at the city, school district, as well as play a proactive part in solving problems within the city. It's not the most instantly gratifying job in the world because the population that he's dealing with often takes quite a while to figure out what their unique issues are and figuring out solutions to helping deal with their particular problems. So he is currently our quality of life deputy and doing a fantastic job for the last couple of months. Tony has attended college at College of the Desert and San Bernardino Valley College, and he hopes here soon to finish his bachelor's degree in business administration. Tony's married and the father of 3 German Shepherds. So it was an interesting way to put it. His hobbies include off-roading in the deserts and mountains, and he enjoys hiking and backpacking in the national parks, which he spends quite a bit of time doing. So with that, I'd like to introduce Deputy Tony Alcala.
So thanks for the opportunity to be the quality of life deputy. I've been in Yucaipa for 5.5 years. So it's become my second home. I probably spend more time in Yucaipa than where I live. So I have a vested interest in the city, and I hope I can make it better for the citizens. And if anybody has any quality of life issues, they can always feel free to contact me at the station. So I'm here to work on making Yucaipa better, so that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Deputy. I remember meeting you with the homeless situation, and you were part of the Met team at the time, and you gave a little presentation. Thank you for your service, and welcome to the Yucaipa substation. Anybody else have anything to say?
I do. I know he's a huge asset. He probably doesn't know this, that I know this, but I get a lot of your reports, and I've seen your name on many of these reports, so I know you're out there doing what you're supposed to be doing and really making a difference. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Your name definitely pops up on our significant incident briefings. We see it a lot. It wasn't a surprise when I saw your name come across for this position. It is my opinion that this position is probably more taxing than that of a station detective or even a specialized detective, in that you are the deputy that the community will turn to for all manners of problems. And it is the expectation that you are our Sheriff Andy Taylor or Barney Fife, if you will. People know you, people see you, they trust you, and they want to communicate with you. That's the hope I see for you, and I have no doubt that you're going to live up to that expectation. So good
Thank
luck.
you, sir.
Thank you. And at this time, Deputy, we'd like to have our picture taken with you. We'll meet you downstairs. Thank you very much again. All right, we'll go ahead and move on now to public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to speak on any issue that's not on the agenda, or specifically on the agenda. Anyone who wishes to speak, there is a slip at the back table right there. Fill out that information, bring it up to our city clerk, and she will bring it up here. You have 3 minutes to speak. Right now, I have but one speaker sign-up slip from David Duran. Come on up.
There's some material there that I'd like you to see. Forgive me for my attire. I just got back from the gym, and I'm stinky and sweaty. I forgot my tie.
Mr. Duran, just for the record, could you restate your name and your address, please?
Sure. David Duran, 36064 Panorama Drive, here in our beautiful city. I'm sorry, my voice is a little raw today. I'd like to speak to you about the Weldy project at Casablanca. There's a serious, in my opinion, there's a serious flaw in the concept of homes and boutique mini vineyards as presented by Mr. Weldy. And based on my research, the plan is not viable. At the last meeting I attended, Mr. Casey here said twice that the vineyards could produce grapes with a value of up to $60,000 per acre. I'm sure you recall that. That's simply not correct. Look at the second page of the presentation that I have made for you. The 2020 study that you're looking at is in front of you is by the Department of Agriculture of California. of California grape production, and it clearly supports a hugely lower figure than $60,000. The Sonoma County red wine area is one of the best in California and probably the world. At $2,200 per ton and 5 tons to the acre, gross revenue is approximately $11,000 per acre, a massive difference from the $60,000. The net, with all costs, is approximately $6,000 per acre. The average red wine grape vineyard brings in $800 per ton. Times the 5 tons per acre, that's $4,000 in revenue. That's a far cry again from $60,000 per acre. And there will be a monetary loss for many years before the vineyards produce fruit. Secondly, I think the tasting rooms should be in the upper Yucaipa Historic District. I noticed that it was mentioned that the wineries themselves should have tasting rooms, and I'm really against that. The siting in Upper Yucaipa may be the last opportunity to make something viable of this district. Think of tasting rooms alongside restaurants and souvenir shops and people visiting from out of town spending their dollars in our beautiful city. Thirdly, I'm concerned with the open space as constructed. To make it habitable and to provide forage for animals, the spaces must be connected to a larger space, such as the Five Winds Ranch. So the animals need to be able to live there and forage there and transit between the two areas. So in summary, the project will not work in concept and design and should go back to the drawing board and to be presented to the city once again. Thank you very much for listening to me. I feel privileged.
Thank you. All right. We don't need to respond to any of this. This is just comments, correct?
We can certainly come back with responses if council so chooses, if that's your direction.
Yeah, I think that would be more appropriate to have something prepared.
Is this something that they're ironing out in the planning commission, or is this something that the council should be ironing out?
Well, there are issues that were discussed that are part of the market study that we're working through the process on. The committee has seen it. I think council's seen some summaries from it, but it is something that would be part of the review process that council will ultimately see. So it could be that you want to wait for the.
Do you know what? Why don't we wait for the full report?
Right.
Yeah, that would be best. All agree?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we'll go on to the next item, consent agenda. Are there any items the council member wish to remove for discussion? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to accept the consent items?
I will move the consent agenda.
And that's items 2 through what?
11.
11? I'll second.
All right, a first and a second. If no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It carries. Moving on to item mayor and council member business. Anybody at the dais have anything to say? Nothing?
No, sir.
Okay. Move on to item number 12, Youth Advisory Committee appointments. Community Services Supervisor Sarah Martinez will give the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I am here this evening as a staff liaison for the Youth Advisory Committee to recommend the appointments of Ava Halimachek and Peyton Barger to the committee. As you know, the committee continues to serve as an advisory body to you, the Yucaipa City Council, and the intent is to improve youth involvement in city issues, activities, and provide committee members a roadmap for success. The 2 Youth Advisory Committee members will continue to recruit for the remaining 2 at-large vacant positions. So Ms. Ava and Mr. Payton are being recommended for appointments for a 2-year term effective today through September 1st, 2023. There is no fiscal impact as a result of this action. So first, it is my pleasure to introduce Miss Ava. She is currently a freshman at Yucaipa High School with an outstanding 4.5 GPA. Ava has been described as having a positive demeanor, a strong work ethic, and leads by example. She is also a member of the YHS freshman volleyball team and is captain on a local club volleyball team as well. Ava is a proud Yucaipa resident and has volunteered in the local K-Kids Club, which is sponsored by the Kiwanis Club, as well as student leaders. The committee was impressed with her recent interview and are excited to recommend her appointment. I have no doubt that she will work well with the Youth Advisory Committee to benefit the Yucaipa community. At this time, I invite Ava to say a few words, after which it will be my pleasure to introduce Mr. Payton.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Ava Helmacek. Like Sarah already said, I'm a freshman in high school and absolutely love to play volleyball. In my free time, I love to play tennis with my dad and hang out with my friends. I am very motivated with my schoolwork and the sports that I am involved in. During the fall season, I played on the freshman volleyball team at Yucaipa and am now playing club at Ivy Force. As we all know, Youth Advisory Committee involves teens helping teens reach a common goal. Teens encounter many difficult problems each day, including drugs, alcohol, and social media. I believe the events we can hold will not only help them de-stress, but also know that we're here to talk and listen. During my middle school years, I was involved in K-Kids, also known as Kiwanis, but also SECA student leaders. I loved being able to see kids smile when they received a donation or just being able to talk to someone. I believe helping people we know will help them build relationships with one another. This year, I was blessed with the job of being a team captain on my club team. This has led me to great possibilities. I have learned to be caring, courageous, and consistent. Every day, I work hard to show a good example for my teammates and also future athletes. I strive to be outgoing and show my teammates to try before you ever give up. I've always known that some days are going to be rough, but taking these rough moments to learn from will allow you to rise above. I believe I can be a very positive and outgoing person. I will work hard with new and existing members to create a beneficial environment for all. Last but not least, someone who inspires me every day is my mom. I strive to be just like her every day, kind, hardworking, and persistent. She's always there for everyone and sets an amazing example. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm excited for my future here and the goals I will reach.
Thank you.
So thank you, Ms. Ava. Now, next, and not to be outdone, I introduce Mr. Payton. He is currently a junior at Yucaipa High School with an impressive 4.35 GPA. He has played on the YHS basketball team and is a member of the school's Key Club, also sponsored by the Kiwanis Club, is a peer tutor, and recently joined the Mito Club. Payton is passionate about the Yucaipa community, especially how he can provide community service through the community. His application included ideas for the committee to volunteer for all ages and demographics, from youth to seniors. The committee and I have no doubt that he will be a great fit for the committee and make a long-lasting impact for the Yucaipa community. So at this time, I invite Mr. Payton to say a few words, after which we'll conclude our presentation. City staff will be available for questions.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and for your consideration to be a part of the Yucaipa Youth Advisory Committee. As mentioned, I'm a junior at YHS. I've lived here in the city of Yucaipa my whole life, and I'm a straight A honor roll student that is aspiring to go to UCSD or UCLA when I get out of high school. I also enjoy basketball and tutoring others around the committee that will just help them grow, and either in subjects like math, science, or English. Once again, I'm very honored that my peers had selected me to be a part of this Youth Advisory Committee, and I also feel I'm very creative, that could bring creative contributions to the youth advisory and also the teens around Yucaipa. And I also want to create a more effective committee and actual Yucaipa, and that creates more welcoming pieces to the youth and is just helpful overall. Thank you again for listening.
Thank you. I'm just so impressed. 4.5, 4.35. They got some brain power over there. I'm just thoroughly impressed. Do we have any questions of staff or of our candidates?
I don't have any questions, but I'm impressed. I mean, the whole group. Who else here is on the youth advisory? If you guys could stand up. Come on, guys, stand up.
Don't be shy.
All right. I know there's, what do we have right now? We have 12?
Well, we have 9 currently serving. They would make 11 if you appoint them. And we do have an interview set for Wednesday of this week, which would make 12 if you appoint them, and it is a 13-person committee. So we are very close to being full.
That's awesome. There's a lot of participation right now. That's great.
Amazing.
But we have an amazing group
They
of
are
kids,
amazing.
and I've got to be able to work with them on a couple of things, and great kids, motivated. I wish I had a 4-point anything when I was in, but it was a great group, and obviously two new great additions.
So is that a motion to accept them?
That is a motion.
I'll second the motion.
Do we have any other comments?
No.
Okay, if no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Congratulations. Welcome to the Youth Advisory Committee. We'd like to have our picture taken with you, if you don't mind. Mr. Casey, did I forget to do the urgency item? Should that have gone first?
No, I think we.
We can do it
you
right now?
elected to do that as the first department report, so.
First, the department report. Okay. So we'll save that for the department reports. Okay, the next item, number 13, fiscal year 21-22 community activity grant in-kind request, special event permit application, Redlands Bike Classic. And I believe that'll be Megan Wolf.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. City staff received a special event permit application from the Redlands Bike Classic, Inc. for the Yucaipa Circuit Professional Bicycle Stage Race that would take place on Thursday, April 21st, 2022. Since receiving the application, staff has met with members of the Redlands Bike Classic, Yucaipa Police Department, Yucaipa Fire Department, Public Works, Yucaipa Calamasa School District, in order to coordinate the details of this special event. On page 211 of the agenda packet is a copy of the application for your review. The main details of the event include the date and time, which will be, again, Thursday, April 21st, and the men's race will begin at 10 a.m. and will consist of 6 laps, with the final lap ascending the back route to Oak Glen Road and finishing at the Village in Oak Glen. And the women's race will begin at 11:15 and will consist of 4 laps with the same final lap. Event setup will begin at 6 a.m. and tear down will be immediately following. The latest that will take place is 4 p.m. The Redlands Bike Classic special event permit and city's co-sponsorship commitment and the community activity grant application include support for Yucaipa Police Department in the amount of $6,000, Yucaipa Fire Department in the amount of $1,200, the Community Development Department in allocated staffing of $2,800, encroachment and special event permit fees, street sweeping, and the promotion of the event on the city website, electronic message boards, social media, and the use of the city logo. The fiscal year 2021-2022 Community Activity Grant Fund for in-kind requests have a balance of $16,408. If City Council approves the in-kind request from Redlands Bike Classic of $7,731.25, the fiscal year 2021-2022 Community Activity Grant Fund balance for in-kind will be in the amount of $8,676.50. Staff is recommending City Council approve the recommendations as listed on page 208 of the agenda packet, and will continue to work with the applicant and all departments and agencies involved. This concludes my report, and staff can answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Hearing none. Hear a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
First and a second. If no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 5-0. Okay, now we're going to go on to possible action on pending legislation. Do we have anything to report?
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor, it's very early in the process, but I was informed this weekend that there is a new piece of legislation going through the process, AB 1400, that is a single-payer approach to healthcare in the state of California. Obviously very expensive, and others that have current healthcare programs that they want to stay with may be affected as well. So Councilmember Thorpe is the gentleman that contacted me this weekend and shared that with me, and perhaps he has a little more information.
That pretty much covers it, just the fact that it's another attempt by the state to possibly take away our choices.
And that affects the city employees benefit program?
Potentially. It's very early in the process. These things change, evolve as they go along, but it came out of committee with a 9-3 vote, I think it was, so it wasn't like it got a lot of resistance in the committee process.
I heard there was a potential price tag of around $160 billion. Yeah, which is, yeah, your taxes will definitely be going up. Yeah, good luck with that one.
I know. I was just like, I don't know. Okay. With that, we'll go on to department reports, and we'll slip in here the urgency item, the Five Winds Ranch Kick Up the Dust Fest update, and I guess that'll be Megan once again.
Well, I'm glad I get to go after that item because then this isn't as bad. Good evening again, Mayor and City Council. Unfortunately, staff has not received a final contract for entertainment for the Kick the Dust Up Fest. Entertainment is a huge part of this event, and in order to sell tickets, we need to make sure that we book the right entertainment. Harbor Productions has submitted a letter to the city, which is attached in the report that was distributed tonight. Currently, the industry is hesitant to confirm shows due to the surge in COVID cases, as well as the change in California COVID guidelines. A change in date will allow more time to finalize the contract for entertainment and to prepare for this event, which includes marketing and ticket sales. Staff is suggesting a date of Friday, June 24th, 2022, and Saturday, June 25th, 2022. Upon council review and approval, staff will continue to work on the details of the event. This concludes my report, and I can answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you. Are any questions of staff?
What was the purpose of that date? It's three months later, right, approximately?
Yes, the reason that date was chosen is due to all the events that are taking place the weekend after March 25th and 26th is the rodeo. The weekend following that is, I think, Easter. And then we have Music and Arts Festival the first week in May. And then there's a holiday in May. And then the first week in June is an outdoor show at the YPAC. And so we chose the last weekend in June as the...
From the standpoint of the pandemic and what the state's going to do, or the purpose of postponing is because the acts aren't booking, because they're concerned about the circumstances? Well, do we have any sense of 3 months delay, how that's going to be?
It is right now, from what I'm hearing from the agencies, is that they feel like COVID is going to the cases are going to decrease and artists are going to be more likely to solidify dates in April, May, June. For example, at the Music and Arts Festival, I don't know if we all recall, but Low Cash backed out, I think the week of they had COVID. And so last minute, we had, they're slipping mine. Thank you, Thompson Square. And they said that they thought when they arrived, everybody was going to be in masks. It was going to be social distance. Nobody could be next to each other. And they were really hesitant to confirm and come to our event because of the information that they hear and see on the media. And so they had the greatest time here. It might have been a little bit different than that. And they thought Yucaipa was great. So I am excited and confident that the artists that we book will love our venue, our staff, and the event.
Let them know that Yucaipa may be under the imperial flag of California, but it's a little bit different. June 24th and 25th is not my birthday, but
I know,
do
that's the
recognize
sad part.
the importance to have sufficient time for y'all to market this festival. And as I say that, our Public Works, I'm not sure if you guys have seen it, they've been up there on weekends trying to get that ranch ready for this festival, really working their tails off. So I'm sure they're probably breathing a little sigh of relief, seeing an extra 90 days thrown their way to get it ready. So it's unfortunate, but I think necessary. So I will move approval on that item.
Megan, did you reach out to Thompson Square again? I thought they did a fantastic job. I'm not opposed to bringing them back, so perhaps.
She's
I
not
have
committing
not reached out to
Okay.
them, but
Well, that's a hint. See if Thompson Square will come back. I'll second Justin's.
We have a first and a second. Any further discussion?
Did you have something?
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, one or more of the council members have talked to me about a tour of the work that's going on up there, and we're happy to schedule that with any or all of you. No more than two at a time, of course. But.
I think it'd be a great idea to see what's going on and what it's turning out to be, and it's going to be great.
I snuck up there thinking nobody would be there on a Saturday. I could just go around and kind of get a feel for myself. Public Works is jamming me up. What are you doing? I'm like, just checking on. All right, I'll leave. I'll get out of your way.
All right, we still have first and second. If no further discussion, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, moving on to item number 14, which is the 2021 Winterfest wrap-up. Ms. Johnson.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I am here this evening to present the 2021 Winterfest wrap-up report. The event was held on Saturday, November 27th, 2021, from 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. And activities included live entertainment, roaming entertainment, a snow zone, Santa's Village, the ice rink, photos with Santa, and our tree lighting ceremony, all of which were operated by city staff. The beer and wine garden that we had in the Uptown Park was hosted by the Knights of Columbus, and the food and merchandise vendors that lined the uptown streets, Yucaipa Boulevard and California Street, were hosted and organized and managed by our Yucaipa Chamber of Commerce. We are happy to report that this was one of our most successful Winterfest events, in which we saw an approximate attendance of 5,000 people throughout the day. I would now like to bring your attention to the screen to show you a few photos that helped us capture the success of the event. This first photo is of a young girl sledding on our snow zone hill, which was definitely a huge hit for kids as little as, I would say, 1 or 2 years old, sitting on their parents' laps, to teenagers and adults alike. So it was a really fun amenity or an addition to our event that we have each year. This is a photo of our ice rink. Of course, as you know, that on Winterfest, we actually sold out every single hour at the ice rink, and so that was a huge hit. Here is a photo or two photos of our children's activities located in our Santa's Village. You'll see here that the children were able to write a letter to Santa and place them in Santa's mailbox. And city staff actually was able to mail those letters to the North Pole and work closely with Santa's elves to make sure that return letters were sent to those children who sent letters to Santa. Here's a little shot of one of our vendors that comes out to our events and does some face painting. If you haven't, does an amazing job. And here are a few photos of our Uptown Park right before our tree lighting ceremony. And that's, of course, you can see where the beer garden was set up, and it is standing room only right before our countdown, which this is actually one of my favorite pictures of the Winterfest to show how many people were there, and with the fire pits and the lights and everything, while Active Church was singing some Christmas songs. And so here is right when the tree was lit. We had Santa on the stage, and council, of course, you were present. Thank you so much. And you can see everyone holding their phones and recording their videos. I'm not sure if you guys saw on social media, but we definitely saw a lot of posts of videos, and everyone just so happy and excited for that tree lighting ceremony. Here's a photo of some festival goers shopping at one of our vendors. And finally, a picture of our sugar plums that wrapped up the night for our live entertainment on the main stage with our beautiful LED wall with the graphics displayed there.
It looks like a postcard.
It's a Hallmark movie. In conclusion, our fiscal year 2021-2022 Winterfest budget projected revenues of $7,800 and expenditures in the amount of $31,400. The actual revenue generated from the event was $14,929, and actual expenditures totaled $32,803. Staff recommends that the balance of $5,726 be added to the ice rink expenditure budget, and staff is finalizing all of those expenditures and revenues and will return to council on February 14th with an ice rink wrap-up report. This concludes my report for Winterfest, and I am happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Thank you, Mary. Are any questions of staff? Okay, this is, I thought this was a receive and file, but is this a receive and file?
And approve a budget.
Yeah, we had some
Oh,
budget
approve,
changes.
that's right. Okay, we have to approve the budget. Do I hear a motion?
So move.
Second.
All right, no further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It carries 5-0. Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 15, agreement for LED streetlight conversion, Southern California Edison. Public Works Analyst, Todd Guchar.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. Tonight, staff is requesting council's approval to enter into an agreement with Southern California Edison for the LS-1 Option E, Energy Efficiency Light Emitting Diode Fixtures Replacement Program. The objectives of street lighting: to attain a level of visibility that enables motorists and pedestrians the ability to see road geometry and road obstructions both quickly and distinctively. Improve public safety and enhance commercial and retail properties by attracting evening shoppers and audiences. Currently, the city has 1,117 streetlights that are owned by Southern California Edison. However, the city pays for the electrical and maintenance costs of those streetlights. What is Hpsv? High-pressure sodium vapor light bulbs, which are in our current existing streetlights that are owned by Southern California Edison. It is old technology utilizing high-pressure gases and materials that are considered hazardous. What is LED? Light-emitting diode light bulbs. Newer solid-state technology and fixtures that are more modern, hazardous material-free, and recyclable. The advantages and disadvantages between LED and Hpsv. Some of the advantages for LED are superior light quality. It's a white, crisp light. Long lifetime. Light bulbs tend to run for over 50,000 hours. You get directional lighting. They're environmentally friendly. They're 100% recyclable, and they use less energy. Some of the minor disadvantages, they are more expensive, but that's to the newer technology that is evolving. If you notice, if you go home and purchase LED light bulbs for your house, prices have dropped drastically from 5-6 years ago to today. That goes for any of the industrial LED lights that are out there. Hpsv advantages and disadvantages. Advantages, they're less expensive because they've been around longer, and it's familiar technology that the product is readily available. Some of the disadvantages, the poor color rendition, a yellowish hue to the lights. They use more energy. They are not recyclable due to the hazardous material, and they have a short lifetime, about 24,000 hours, half that of the LED. This picture here shows a brief caricature of LED versus Hpsv. LED streetlights, like I said before, use less electricity or energy. They improve visibility and public safety through improved night visibility and color perception, as well as improved general aesthetics during nighttime hours. As you can see from the character, LED lights, we have a direct light that we can focus down in either narrow or widen depending on the environment, versus the high pressure sodium, which is a little bit wider in glare. This also reduces the amount of light pollution, which is also dark sky friendly.
I'm sorry, the LEDs produce less light
The
pollution?
LEDs produce less glare, therefore the dark sky friendly, which is big. If you guys are familiar with Flagstaff, Arizona, one of the main cities in the nation that has a dark sky friendly environment. These are selected photos from throughout the country. They were picked up on the internet that just show the examples of Hpsv with the yellow hues versus a changeover to LED. If you see the LED lights are a white, crisp light, you get more color contrast and distinctive color versus the yellow hue or orange hue in this area up here. This photo right here just shows the different type of head on the mast that is proposed to be replaced. The carbon footprint reduction. The city of Yucaipa can reduce its carbon footprint by reducing greenhouse gas emissions by approximately 289 metric tons of carbon equivalent per year. That totals about removing 61.4 passenger vehicles per year every year. The Southern California LS1 Option E program. This is an extension of the Southern California Edison Street Light Acquisition Program, which was in place from 2012 to 2015. It converts Southern California Edison-owned streetlights from Hpsv to LED. Southern California Edison continues to own and maintain the streetlights and also continues to carry the liability. There will be no upfront cost to the city for the conversion, and the cost savings are realized due to the reduced energy costs. And the program incorporates an energy efficiency premium, which Southern California Edison's conversion costs for the new LED fixtures are recovered over a 20-year program. This slide shows the cost comparisons between the Hpsv streetlights as well as the LS1 option. The first column, the first graphic or first table is what we currently pay for the Hpsv streetlights. The second table shows the LS1 option E year 1 through 20. And this third column or third table shows the LS1 option E year 21 plus. If you see from the first Hpsv, we have 1,117 Southern California Edison-owned streetlights within the city. The annual energy cost currently is $97,131 with the $108,976 annual maintenance cost. That is incorporated in our Edison bill along with the energy costs. So we get a total bill, annual bill for streetlights at $206,107. For the LS1 option E, year 1 through 20, the contract or the agreement through Edison is year 1 through 20 where we pay off, in a sense, the costs. Then after year 21 plus, we receive all that money back and we see that all that money back in the reduced energy costs. So for year 1 through 20, again, 1,117 streetlights. Our energy cost drops to $40,323. We are paying a $20,669 annual conversion costs, with the annual maintenance costs remaining the same, but our annual costs will drop to $169,968. For the option year E, year 20 plus, our annual net energy costs will remain the same, but we lose, or the annual conversion cost drops off. So we receive the full $56,000 discount or cost savings, and we see that fully matured. The annual maintenance cost remains the same, but the annual total cost drops down to $149,299. So again, that's almost a $56,000 savings that we'll see in 20 plus years, and that will be an annual savings that we will see. This current photo, just to show that we do have LED streetlights within the city. I think we're all familiar with this photo in the historic Uptown. These are city-owned streetlights that do have LED fixtures. So we just wanted to call and to point out that you can see some contrasting Hpsv lights within the businesses, and also up here further up the boulevard. It just kind of shows the difference. We wanted to state that we've talked to Southern California Edison, and once an agreement has been signed, if it is signed, it will take about 5 months for them to mobilize. And then once mobilized, it will take about 2 to 3 weeks to fully install the 1,100 lights throughout the city. It is also noted that we just want to let you know that in the past 6 months, 4 agencies within Southern California Edison's territory have converted over to the LS1 Option E program. That concludes my report, and I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Todd. Are any questions?
I don't have a question, but I think this is an awesome thing to do. One of the benefits to converting to LED, and this is something Justin would probably know, but for law enforcement, when you're going back and investigating an incident with high-pressure sodium lighting, sometimes that will falsely influence your cameras for your color descriptions for your vehicles or your personnel that you're looking for, whereas the LED will give you a truer color renderance, a more factual evidence.
Yes.
Nice, I support this.
Okay, this requires a vote. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any further comments? If not hearing anything, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It passes. Thank you very much, Don.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item number 16, fiscal year 21-22 mid-year general fund budget report. Mr. Hamilton.
I'll start us off, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay, and then ask Director of Finance, Andrew Hamilton, to help with the PowerPoint element of the staff report. But some of this has to do with history, so if council wishes, I can start with that part of the discussion. So as council recalls, I'm sure, we have a 30-year history of conservatively budgeting on an annual basis. Oftentimes, we see an increase in sales tax or property taxes from and other revenues from original projections in our budget. And part of what you're going to hear today is that we are experiencing that this year as well. It's probably exacerbated a little bit in a good way, given that the forecasts for sales tax impacts as associated with the pandemic were pretty severe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, as we were starting to develop the budget. And fortunately, things worked out a little better than, or quite a bit better in most cases in all parts of the state and the nation, and largely because the shutdowns that occurred were a little shorter than, quite a bit shorter than some had predicted when HDL and others were doing forecasts several years ago. And so you'll hear some of that good news today in terms of this year's budget. But I wanted to take a minute and talk about how the city has structurally used the budget process, and starting with projected net revenues in the current fiscal year, going back 10 or 15 years, 20 years, to help fund larger projects, and evolving as of 8 or 10 years ago to using net revenues from previous fiscal years that are already accrued as a little bit more conservative approach to fund larger projects and other things, but largely their projects. And over the years, the city has helped to fund or funded City Hall, the police station, fire station, of course the YPAC, different traffic improvements, drainage improvements like Yucaipa Boulevard, the interchange. Oftentimes those were loans either to other agencies or to our development impact fee program. Not as much recently, but that was the case for a number of years. And at least from my perspective, that's a very conservative approach to funding some of those larger projects as opposed to other cities that may sell bonds, general obligation bonds or other types of bonds for those kinds of projects. So that, again, has been our history for some time. And so that leads me, if I may, to go through a kind of a chronological approach to the mid-year review. And starting with fiscal year 1920, as council may recall, that additional fund balance that was created tentatively was accomplished through a reclassification that council approved that was a total of a little over $5 million in miscellaneous traffic projects that were to be reimbursed to the general fund from the traffic fund. And council approved that a while back. And then for fiscal year 2021, this previous fiscal year, as council may recall, again, the projections for sales tax reduction were pretty dire. What HDL and others were forecasting was in excess of a 15% hit to our sales tax fund. And at the same time, if you recall, we had increases in public safety costs, police and fire, police at 8%, fire at 5%. And so we, and also at the same time, or shortly thereafter, the state decided that very few of our community services programs could be provided at that point. They were essentially shut down. The YPAC was shut down, community center and senior center were all kind of shut down during that fiscal year. And so we recommended some significant adjustments in the city hall side of the budget, if you will, to reflect those things, both the dire projections for revenues and also the increases in public safety as a result of those contracts with those respective agencies. And so a pretty significant decrease in staffing for a city our size of 6 personnel in both community services, engineering, and planning. And as I'm sure council will recall, it had some impacts in terms of response times for planning and engineering and trying to keep as many of the doors open in community services as we could. And so I want to thank the staff for all of those efforts, but those adjustments, together with the ones I'm about to list for you, resulted in actually a net revenue for fiscal year 2021. The CARES Act funding, we were able to use CARES Act funding to help pay for the police department costs and a few other costs, but primarily police department costs. Sales tax hit wasn't nearly as bad as was predicted or forecast. Property taxes, same thing. Received some miscellaneous fire revenues from other agencies with respect to equipment used by them, the state agencies and others, primarily state agencies. And of course, some other miscellaneous revenue increases all resulted in a net revenue for fiscal year 2021 that was substantive. And so we were able to also use the ARPA funding going into this fiscal year to offset the cost of rehiring those 6 positions. And so that was also good news. So with that, I'm going to stop for a minute and ask Andrew to kind of go through the PowerPoint in general. And then if I may, I'd like to come back and to council with the kind of closing discussion about the mid-year budget itself. But I'd like to stop there. That's, unless maybe there are questions about the history before we go into the rest of the mid-year budget. Perhaps that would be helpful.
Any questions?
Okay. If
Thank
that's
you,
okay,
Mr.
then-
Casey.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. So as we look at this first slide, this is a summary of the table on page 249 in the staff report. As you can see, the bottom line, the adjusted budget surplus, et cetera. This mid-year budget, the final column on the right, shows a $308,000 improvement from, in mid-year, the third numbered, the third column with figures in it compared to the first column. This is mostly due to the revisions in the 2Q, the second quarter related to improved property taxes, sales and use taxes, as Ray's mentioned. That's also translates to recommendation number 1, A and B, as you can see later on. As we move to slide 2, some of the highlights, I think Ray's gone over some of these, so you can see some of these items. And again, the fiscal 20 is mostly due to that approximately $5.267 million transfer that the City Council approved. If you look down in the bottom sections, these are some of the details for fiscal 21, the preliminary general fund net income, net revenues of $3.25 million. At the bottom, you can see some of those details as they relate to CARES Act. These are some of the preliminary figures for fiscal 21. We're still under audit, so these are preliminary figures related to revenue. And again, these then are the reason for highlighting the amounts in recommendation number 6. As Ray said, the city's conservative practice of saving before spending is what translates to that proposed transfer of $5.2 million and related to the recommendations in number 2. So the way of recording this proposed transfer in recommendation number 6 is practiced by numerous communities in Southern California. In addition, all of the existing city council approval for procurements, capital projects remain in place. They're not necessary to be identified or approved at this time. So these next 2 and final slides just are a summary, if you will, of 2 specific funds. The first fund is a financial summary of the Paramedic Fund. If you look at the green line in revenue, you can see it's pretty stable. The expenditures in orange are increasing as costs related to providing that service increase. And in instance, that equates to the line in blue, that the lower line, which is increasing. That's the required transfer from the fire fund. It, as you can see, is a growing negative impact, which, if the trends hold true, will continue to have a continued drain of resources for the fire fund. I know that slide's kind of a downer.
Can we forecast if nothing changes, how long before that'll be depleted? Has that been forecasted yet?
The paramedic fund already is at a.
If we continue with no adjustments, how long before if nothing changes as to date, and the revenues maintain, and we continue transferring to supplement that, how long before we see our?
Are you talking about the fire fund running out of?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so paramedic, just to reiterate, that one's already been depleted.
Right.
And the fire fund, I don't have that figure right off the top of my head.
Okay.
Where does it currently stand?
The fire fund, I could probably
calculate it in a minute.
Did 8 million, I think. It's in the departmental budget.
8.5 million, you said?
Sounds about right.
And it's being depleted by how much per year?
It's 800,000 this year, but the fire fund's going upside down a little bit as well. Just the paramedic is 800,000.
Okay. I think that's the math right there, right?
Yeah. But it also increases every year. That amount increases every year. So it goes from 800 to a million to 1.3 million to, because the costs keep going up, but the revenue is stable.
Right.
Yeah, I'll get back to you on the fire fund balance. It's rolled up into the general fund, so I just need to get back to you on that.
Thank you.
So going to the fire fund, you can see the green revenue increasing approximately with, you know, the cost of living in essence that we get for property tax. That's about what it is. The orange is expenditures. That does not include the transfers to the paramedic fund. So revenues, expenditures, they're kind of trending together, but however, you can see that transfers to the paramedic fund. It's not being, there's not enough revenue there to make that transfer. And that's continuing, you know, that trend has continued from 18-19 fiscal years to forecasted in 21-22, the current fiscal year we're in. So I think at this time, I pass it back to Ray.
So any questions for Andrew before I go on? So, yeah, I noticed that the balance is no longer in the budget document. It used to be in the front page of the fire fund. So we can add that back to the budget document this coming year, but it is continuing to deteriorate. And just for the record, we have continued since almost inception of the city to separate the general fund from the fire fund, or fire fund from the rest of the general fund, based on a percentage of revenues that are allocated to the fire fund. And then the paramedics have all, system or program has always been kind of a third silo, if you will, funded through the assessment, but expenses separated. At the end of the year, of course, in the audit process, all of it is combined, but we track all three separately and have for many, many years. So with respect to the allocation of funds from those net revenues I talked about that are being recommended today, specifically, we're requesting allocation of $400,000 for the Freeway Corridor Specific Plan, EIR, and that's the next step in the process of the Freeway Corridor Specific Plan update. We've been working on that for several years. We should be coming to you, or a year and a half, we should be coming to you with the land use plan here shortly. And when I say working on it, it started with going after grant funding several years ago from SCAG. So we haven't been working on putting the document together that long. So we should be coming to you with a land use, a draft land use plan within the next several meetings. And then if directed appropriately, move forward with the EIR and environmental studies based on that. We're in similar situation with the Yucaipa Valley Wine Country Specific Plan. Council has seen that several times. We're in the process, based on council direction, working with a subcommittee on design guidelines and finishing up with the overall committee on some issues there, but expect to come back to you with a plan that would be able to support, or the EIR would support the plan, moving forward with the EIR on that project as well. And we estimate that is the same amount, about $400,000. Both of those would be reimbursable to the city if the council so chooses for projects that are completed pursuant to those EIRs. We're basically moving ahead of the private development, community private property owners, and facilitating that process by doing a master or a program EIR for the freeway corridor specific plan, for example. And then the battalion chief vehicle is updated to be 115,000 based on current prices. We just, because of availability, couldn't get it ordered and delivered last year. So it was approved, but we're recommending it for reapproval, if you will. I'd like to talk a little bit then, do you have any questions about those allocations? And then a total allocation of 5.2 million beyond that, which would be presented to council through the goals and objectives process like we do every year, where you would prioritize the investment. Now, that doesn't have to be projects per se. It could be cameras, it could be ALPRs, it could be things like that that we have invested in for security reasons over the years as well.
I think the biggest concern that I have with fronting the money for an EIR is that I know we did that on our Wilson Creek detention area. And then we paid a large sum of money. Was it close to $1 million for an EIR?
It was a combination of a number of things, the planning and the EIR, but yes.
But we paid a lot of money for this EIR, but then the project evolved and it kept evolving and we kept changing this EIR, and so every time that the project evolved, we had to change, and it cost more and more and more, and this EIR just exploded. So I'm not a real big fan. I think we might be able to get away with it on this one, but I would suggest that we stop doing that because I think in the long run, it costs the city more money when it really should be the developer that pays for it. Just a thought.
What,
Am I on the wrong track there, Ray? or-
no, you're not. But what can we do to mitigate the bleed so we don't keep coming back with modifications and adjustments to the EIR?
And I don't want to understate that process because I understand exactly where you're coming from. The overall project cost stayed, I think, within a normal contingency, but the planning effort was complicated by a number of things that I don't think we're going to see, just like we didn't see in the EIR process for the freeway corridor specific plan the first time around. We also didn't see a lot of development pursuant to that, but we didn't see a lot of changes once that we got far enough along in the planning process. The planning process, EIR process, and design process on the Wilson 3 project, because it's more than a basin project, was complicated by a couple of things. One, we evolved in terms of what those surplus property land uses were going to be. If you remember, we first started out with a light industrial project to try to facilitate Sorensen Engineering's expansion. And because of the community reaction, rightfully so, the community didn't feel like that was a good fit for the neighborhood. We evolved to a residential project. Of course, that planning and that environmental impact is much different for a residential project than it is for a light industrial project. And then the project itself, the basin project, the channel improvements, those evolved as well over time. And that precipitated some increased costs relative to planning and engineering. We're not going to go that far with the design of channels or streets or with the North Bench EIR / specific plan or the freeway corridor specific plan. The original specific plan for the freeway corridor, for example, identified normal street sizes and normal channel sizes, and that's it. Stop there. No final design, no change in final design because of the environmental permitting process and how some of those folks have an impact on our design process. And so absolutely understand that process, that cost associated with the Wilson 3 project grew over time in that planning, design, and environmental effort. But it was complicated by all those pieces changing, including the environmental permitting process. We won't go past the conceptual design. We won't go into the environmental review at all, other than in terms of specific projects, other than the EIR itself. So
will that still be required by the developer?
Yes.
Okay.
When the developer goes forward, they're gonna have to.
We're not actually paying for the development side of the EIR then, are we?
No, no, well, two things. One, freeway corridor specific plan's a little bit different than the North Bench specific plan. With the freeway corridor specific plan, we would be accomplishing a program EIR if council approves it. A large project would still have to do its own environmental process, whether it's a Medigag, NEGDEC, or an EIR, depends on the size of the project. But this would pave the way in terms of, you know, the preliminary impact reviews of all of the, you know, all the things that people look at, traffic and biology and all of that. But they would still have to go through their own environmental process. Second, we would be reimbursed for the program EIR costs. The specific plan law allows us to do that, and I would recommend that. And third, they would still have to do their own final design for each of these projects, like a channel improvement project or a road project that they would have to build and ensure that it is covered under their own environmental process. So that's a different process than the Wilson 3.
Okay.
And this EIR is basically an update with some changes in compared to the original EIR document?
Right, another great question. In both cases, we have original EIR documents for the areas within the boundary. With the freeway corridor specific plan, either EIR or mitigate NEGDEC. With the freeway corridor specific plan, we have an EIR that was done in the 2004-05 range, something like that. I think that's about right. And so, as you know, not a lot has changed in that area, but some in terms of the field, but some laws have changed. So it would be updated to reflect whatever changes in the field and changes in law. The North Bench specific plan boundary has a number of different projects. Some of them have lesser environmental reviews than some of the larger ones, but they've all done biological studies and those sorts of things that, again, would just have to be updated for new laws, new state requirements, and any changes in the field. But they've all done biological studies and traffic studies and that sort of thing, and so we'd be looking at changes.
Does that take in consideration the warehouses? I mean, are the warehouses involved in the freeway specific plan or the freeway corridor specific plan?
It definitely could. Those warehouses are in the planning process, and as we go through the freeway corridor specific plan update, that would be up to council to approve those land use changes and then ultimately the subsequent mitigations relative to the EIR and their EIRs. Okay?
Okay.
All right, and the battalion chief vehicle I talked about. And then if I could, and I think Andrew's got an answer to the question. In fact, why don't we do that first? Go ahead.
It's approximately $8 to $9 million in fund balance. So if it's on a burn rate of about, 700 in the current year, if it's going to go up, average about $1 million, you've got about 8 years left.
I think it's going to increase faster than that. But
Yeah.
we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Under the current trend. Okay, if I could, I'd like to talk about the reorganization phase 2 for this fiscal year next, and it's primarily related to staffing that is required to open up the El Dorado Ranch Park again and expand the services there to include group camping, equestrian camping, et cetera. And there are a couple of other things I'll get to, but I'll start with that. And if council recalls, at least some of council members that were involved when the conceptual plan was approved, the commitment was made to the community at that time when we do open up for camping and group camping and those types of things, that we would have staffing on site, a park ranger, community services staff to deal with the check-ins and all of that. And so that's part of the recommendation this evening, Public Works / Park Ranger and a Community Services Coordinator. And it's, again, primarily to staff the Five Winds El Dorado Ranch park. Supervisor is also being recommended in the community services. Part of that is the park, as we continue to evolve towards opening up the venue up at the El Dorado Ranch Park. It becomes even more important. And that supervisor would also help with some other staffing needs for the community services department. This holiday season, for example, we had some illnesses in the community services, and we had folks covering, I'll just say way too much, as we have had public works folks out working on the weekends to try to get that El Dorado Ranch Park ready for the festival. We also had community services folks working a lot of hours over the holidays, and I certainly appreciate that. But one of the things that we talked about last year when the development community had some concerns, and I would still say our response times are better than all of our neighbors, but when some of the development community members had concerns about engineering and planning response times, those were some of the positions that we froze. And so in order to offset the public safety cost increases and the projected forecast sales tax reduction for that year. So I don't think we want to reopen the park with the camping services and all that without being properly staffed, and that's how staff is recommending that. In addition, in Public Works, we've got a special projects and maintenance engineer that recently retired that we feel could be reduced, downgraded to an assistant/associate engineer position for a slight savings. And the Public Works inspector, who does lots of other things as well, we feel is performing the duties of, a lot of the duties anyway, of a construction engineer position already. And so our recommendation is to promote that person to construction engineer. A couple other more minor things, the Allison Mechanical contract, we're recommending an increase there. Just some of our facilities, air conditioning units are getting older and need more service, and so that's the request there. And then, again, I talked about the $5.2 million net amount for what's remaining for capital fund transfer from previous net revenues, and the plan is, if council concurs, to bring that to you in the goals and objectives process. Part of this, by the way, is to kind of move the schedule forward, certainly from where we were last year, but move the schedule forward across the gamut of financial activity. So we want to move the audit report up. We want to move the mid-year up, of course, January instead of February. We want to move the goals and objectives process up a little bit, and for two reasons. One, it ties in, like we talked about earlier tonight, with the audit report. So having this transfer happen now prior to the audit report is important for that reason. But it also helps us as a team, council, staff, take the time we need to really look hard at the budget process, during the budget process, at the budget. So part of this exercise of talking about this tonight, and you'll hear later on about the paramedic fee subscription to help offset that, that increasing deficit in the paramedic budget. Trying to get clear direction this evening from council to be able to move forward with the budget process in an expedient and reasonable way. That kind of goes through all of the elements of the mid-year budget. Happy to answer any questions. Generally, the revenue projections are better than original budget first quarter. I think they're going to continue to be better by the end of the year. We're still being conservative, but we're moving in the right direction. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ray. Any questions?
I have a question. So reallocating the position of special projects and maintenance engineer to assistant associate engineer, is that an engineering degree required for that job?
Yes.
And then the second one, the same thing, reallocating the position of public works inspector to construction engineer. Is that also an engineering degree?
The description for the construction engineer position requires a certain certificated construction and other construction skills. So, and there is some, engineering degree is not required, but 60 units of coursework in the related field is what is required.
Are these promotions within the staff right now?
One is a recently retired staff member that has the existing position. We're recommending that the position be downgraded to assistant/associate. So there is no incumbent in that position at this time.
What about the second one?
Second one is a inspector that is being recommended for that promotion.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just, I guess unrelated but related, who writes the job dimensions for these positions? Is that Mr. Casey, is that you that determines the?
It's a team effort. Usually the department takes a crack at it. I'll do a final review, and our HR, which is now Sherry, of course, will also review it to make sure we meet certain criteria, industry standard criteria.
Yeah, so it's not just you make it up. There are examples and criteria that you follow.
Yeah, starting with even the departmental review of it. Correct.
Okay, any other questions?
I'm sorry, related to what we just discussed, or is that the conclusion of the staff report?
That's the conclusion of the staff report, unless there are other questions.
Yes, so, we know, we just heard that we have this deficit, and we're proposing the moving of monies. My question is, I think if I gather this correctly, the intent of these reallocation is this service-based. We want to try to provide a more professional, a more accommodating service to the community that we are all sworn to serve, right?
Yeah, that's correct, yes.
Okay. Do you believe that if these adjustments aren't made, if we don't move forward with this, and you were to forecast where we would be next year, would we be able to provide the same level of service we've been providing for the last year? Would that start to become taxing on our staff, and to the point where we would start to maybe lose staff? Is there a defensible position you can take on these moves so that we can, withstand the light of day should, financially we fall out from underneath of us right after these decisions are made?
Yeah, thank you for that. Good question. Two-part answer. The first part, and I neglected to mention this in my staff report, I apologize, but the public works positions are typically about 95%, 90 to 95% billable to projects. So at the end of the day, it's a net cost of the other 5 to 10%. And so those positions are essential for the projects that we're doing, and that includes land development projects. The review of the 25 to 30 acre project down by the freeway is taking a lot of staff time relative to inspections and review of changes and those sorts of things. So those positions are important for the service to the community, to the developer, and in terms of the projects that we all want to see get completed. With respect to community services and the park ranger position, I just don't feel comfortable opening up that park again to camping and all of the things that we have talked about over the years and promised to the community without the staffing there. Do we have the funding to continue to pay for these folks? I think you've seen again that we've been conservative in our budgeting. I'll be the first to admit, a year and a half ago, we were probably overly conservative given the dire forecast we all heard about sales tax decreases and all of that. But we continue to be conservative, and the mid-year budget review today is conservative still. I feel confident that even when the ARPA funding is gone, and there is a little more flexibility now in the use of ARPA funding, we will continue to have a balanced budget. Just a reminder of that, the reasons for that original budget deficit. this fiscal year, we moved money, several $1 million into our budget this year for projects that were yet to be completed, or we moved the expenses into our budget. We didn't move the revenues into our budget. We saved those monies for a number of years, and those revenues are below the line. They're the assigned fund balance instead of above the line. So right off the bat, you have that impact. On top of that, you've got the ARPA funding to help pay for the 6 positions that we filled this year. Everybody, I think, felt comfortable we had to fill those 6 positions to serve the community well. And so those expenses are above the line. That ARPA reimbursement is below the line. So again, it shows that as an impact on the fund balance and then the ARPA funding in general. So you add those things up is how you get to that structural imbalance, if you will. But again, everything is going in the right direction. I'm pretty confident that, and ARPA funding is available next year. That $8 million will be spread over several years. That I'm very confident that we'll have a balanced budget next year with the ARPA funding, and beyond that, a balanced budget. Part of that is because of the trends that we're seeing in sales tax and property tax, and that's without a number of these new restaurants and businesses that are opening up as we speak. So,
Thank you. And I want to make sure I clarify that as on the Finance Committee, I had the opportunity to speak with you prior to this meeting, and I wanted to make sure that I'm iterating for the public the questions that I had. I agree. I think the intent is to rebound us from the dark days of the pandemic and get us back to normal. I still maintain that the American Rescue Plan Act is altogether unnecessary. If Yucaipa just does what Yucaipa does and be a thriving community, we can support ourselves, we can be self-sufficient without the government's assistance. So
That's what we've always strove to do the best we can with the funds we have. And as time comes in, businesses, you said, and we have housing units coming in, and all of those are going to need to be supported by staff to do the plans and inspections. And so the demand for the uptick in staff requirements are there. We're on the cusp right now, I think. There's going to be other projects coming in, and we're going to get busy. Any other questions? All right, this requires a vote to approve the report. Do we need to read the different recommendations, or can we just?
I would just say staff would recommend approval of all of the recommendations in the staff report.
I will move item 1, 2, 3.
As amended, I'm sorry.
4, 5, and 6 as amended.
Okay, we have a motion to approve.
I'll second his motion.
And a second. If no further discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It carries. Very good. Okay, now we're moving on to public hearings. The first item is going to be adoption of the urgency ordinance number 405-U Union, which extends urgency ordinance number 404-Union that establish interim standards for the implementation of SB 9. Okay, open up the public hearing, and our speaker is going to be Ben Matlock.
Yep. Thank you all, Mayor and City Council members. Before you is ordinance number 405. Essentially, this is extending ordinance number 404-U. As the council may recall, recently SB 9 was approved by the state, which established provisions that allow essentially urban lot splits or second unit dwellings on any single family zone property. And this law essentially went into effect on January 1st of this year. As part of the implementation, or at least making sure that we are prepared to receive requests for these type of projects, at the December City Council meeting, we recommended adoption, and City Council approved ordinance number 404, which established kind of a interim standards as a stopgap while we develop a official ordinance that implements SB 9 consistent with state law, as well as including the objective design standards that the city is allowed to provide. As part of both the review of developing the formal ordinance, it does take some time to go through the process, and certainly with a transformative type of law that SB 9 is, we want to make sure that we do a thorough job in providing objective standards. And so with that, as part of ordinance number 404, it was valid for 45 days. And so with an extension, which is this ordinance number 405, it can be extended for a total of a year from when the urgency ordinance was first adopted. So that gives us to December of 2022 to develop the formal ordinance for SB 9. And staff remains committed to working on creating this among our other projects that we have in the pipeline and making sure that we have appropriate standards in place for SB 9 related projects. And that is my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ben. Are any questions of staff? Mr.
I'll move approval.
Okay, we have a motion to approve.
I'll second.
And we have a second. I do have a question. One of the things that we're talking about is paramedic fees, subscription service. I had an opportunity to talk to the mayor of Montclair today, and he paints a pretty gloom picture of the subscription service. It's volunteer, and there are no.
Mr. Mayor, you may be skipping ahead a little bit. That's
Am I really?
Next item, I'm sorry.
And then I do want to know, as a public hearing, if there's any public.
This is about
comments
SB 9 and the lot splits.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you know what? My brain is just going crazy. Never mind.
There's a potential proposition that's coming up that'll actually negate this, potentially, so. It's in the works.
Mr. Mayor, if we could just confirm that there were no public speakers for this item and then close the hearing.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close the hearing if there's no public speakers. And close the hearing
And then, as far as the motion in the second, if you don't mind, I will read the title of the ordinance, which we need to do prior to adoption, and that is it's urgency ordinance number 405-U, an extension of an urgency ordinance of the City Council of the City of Yucaipa adopting emergency regulations related to urban lot splits and housing units built in accordance with Senate Bill 9 and declaring the urgency thereof.
Okay, we have a first and a second. If no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, let's see if I can get back on track. Item number 18, is that the study session? 838 structure fee, paramedic fee. Chief Malinowski.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. We'll start with the AB 38 first. So on July 1st, 2021, Assembly Bill 38 or AB 38 went into effect. This law requires real estate transactions in California that are located in CAL FIRE's high or very high fire hazard severity zones to have a defensible space inspection and disclosure on escrow, regardless of their jurisdiction. A similar program has existed for decades where any residence in the state responsibility area or SRA receives this inspection annually and receives clearance or a reinspection and correction notice. This is for defensible space as far as around the house of vegetation. This bill will also have some components where the listees will need to disclose low-cost retrofits for home hardening published by the Office of the State Fire Marshal if applicable, as well as mandated wildfire mitigation plan collaboration between OES and CAL FIRE. This bill provides funding for one CAL FIRE inspector for each of the 21 statewide administrative units, but no funding for local jurisdictions. That burden will fall to the city of Yucaipa for the residences inside our city. CAL FIRE Prevention, our law enforcement bureau, has been meeting regularly with the realtor groups to disseminate this information, as this is the only rollout that has come from the state. One perceived issue with this bill is there's no policing of the required disclosure. So a home can close escrow, and if the listing agent listee is unaware of the law, doesn't follow it, doesn't know, they don't request an inspection, they can be held civilly liable for not disclosing. Currently, the Yucaipa Fire Department is facilitating these inspections with approximately one per week, with thousands of residences in the high and very high hazard severity zone. This number could potentially increase. When we polled other jurisdictions, we found they are applying an AB 38 inspection fee to offset the increased staff time. These fees range anywhere from $85 to $240, with the median being about $150 to $160. Staff recommends that the council establish an AB 38 inspection user fee and allow city staff to recommend the appropriate user fee amount and direct the fire department to continue the inspections with the consideration to reanalyze the inspection program if the workload becomes unsustainable for frontline paramedic engines to facilitate. This proposal was presented to the Public Safety Ad Hoc Committee on January 13th. It was approved by them and recommended for full council review at study session. That concludes my report for AB 38, if you have any questions on that.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions of staff?
Grant, do you have a letter from EVAR or the realtor group saying that this is okay? And then my second question is, it's the listing agents that are responsible for implementing this, correct?
Correct.
So isn't it the listing agent that should be paying to have this service done to protect them? Why? Or do we have to force that upon them? I'm not really clear on.
But there's really no police.
Why are we paying the realtors? I'm sorry, maybe I should have thought this through a little bit better, but I know that the realtors are the ones that are required to have this done, correct? Shouldn't they be requesting it from you to come and do the inspections?
They are.
They are.
Yeah, so they go onto a portal through the state website, and by the way, this was a legislature item, not CAL FIRE driven, just for clarification. They request it through the portal, and it could be the listee, because there's a lot of folks who are selling their own homes through different means now. There's, some untraditional real estate transactions. They would request it through our portal, and it would come to the city through the portal, and then whatever we do with it locally would be at, essentially our behest.
And as of right now, it's free.
It's free because we're just facilitating. We have 7 days from the request to facilitate the inspection, so.
And the realtors group are okay with the $85 to $240 inspection?
I have not discussed that with the realtors, given the information, but we haven't discussed that with them.
I'd like to just see some information from them. I know that this is something that they're gonna definitely be fired up over, one way or the other. They may support it, they may.
A lot of neighboring cities have already enacted the user fees.
Have they?
Yes.
So just for clarification, we wanted to come to you first on both of these items before we did a whole lot of work on it, and including consulting with other folks. And what we're seeking tonight is general direction about whether you want us to go forward, do the work that is required to come back with actual fees. So
I'm okay with it if the Realtor Association's okay with it.
Since right now, this is not in the car forms when you do the residential sale or purchase agreement. I don't remember seeing anything like this in there where you check it or not check it. And so you're saying that the seller of the home pays a fee to clear up the fact that the house is safe from a wildlands fire, and they pay you or pay us, or?
Well, they don't pay anything. That's just what we're presenting, because the city's gonna be required to facilitate these inspections. So it is a disclosure notice, but like I said, there's no policing on it. So you go sell a home, there's no necessary checkbox, but now you, as the listing agent, didn't disclose this, or the listee didn't disclose this, now they can be held civilly liable for not disclosing this. So there's no good policing measure built into this.
So the fee is to offset staff time, so that essentially the city is not subsidizing the
State unfunded mandate.
So escrow would pay this then? Out of escrow, somebody would get paid?
I would assume that's
Huh,
not my department, but I would.
interesting.
So
Very
consider
interesting.
I would consider it be part of I'm not a realtor, I don't deal with.
I am a realtor,
Great
and
question, I know, but,
I've not
so I
heard
would
of
think
this
that would
at
be
all.
part of the closing costs and all that.
Well, this says it was only implemented July 2021.
Yes, and there was not a good
So
rollout,
the forms wouldn't have changed by now.
So consider that person who's consistently buying, and selling, and flipping houses. This could take up a lot of your staff's time.
Yeah.
One person, and unless there's a city fee, they're essentially the taxpayers are footing the bill for you, for your folks to go out there and do these inspections.
Right, and just like any inspection, it's not typically a one and done. It's a correction notice and re-inspect, and it's not a simple in and out in 5 minutes.
So about the time this was passed through our state legislature, Chief, you came before council with a citizen of our city, Doug Williams, and we declared or we recognized one of our communities in the city of Yucaipa as a fire-wise community, which, if I understood it correctly at that time, was already inspected by your staff to determine that the homes were prepared, improving ingress and egress for the safety, for evacuation, and for dire department ingress to fight the fires. It almost sounds like an inspection already. Is that accurate?
I would say that's consistent with it, yes.
So from my seat, I think it would be interesting to see if this can gather some traction in other communities that are in the high fire zone. Perhaps we can have a fee, but that fee be waived if communities come together and find themselves declared as a fire-wise community already. It seems redundant to have the inspections done, become a declared fire-wise community, and then give them a fee for an inspection when they've already met the requirements. They're declared as a fire-wise community through whatever governing body does that. It might gain more attraction for other communities to try to get that done within our city. That's my recommendation.
I agree, and I think we could come back with that tiered user fee if you guys so approve. And further into that, I've been working with the insurance groups, because there's some insurance fair share, because that's the reality we're at right now, where they will give a reduced rate for fire-wise communities. So there's some other incentives where they'll give that a pretty marketable, maybe 20% reduction in cost for those very high home insurance costs when they're in the very high fire hazard severity zones.
Who monitors the fire-wise communities, make sure that they stay consistent?
That's through NFPA. We don't have control over that. So they work with us. We are a component of that. So they have to vet it through the local fire official, which is me, and then our resource management, our foresters. So we are a component of their plan, and it's through NFPA.
Would you? I'm sorry.
No, the inspection is conducted by whom?
We come up with the plan, so we do help with that, but then ultimately NFPA consolidates everything and then they issue that. I really don't know off the top of my head the recurrency, but I know there is obviously, it's not a one and done to maintain that plan. So I could come back to you with that.
Okay. Go ahead.
I lost my train of thought.
So tonight we'd really be seeking just a study session if we would like to pursue user fees for state unfunded mandate for additional inspections and staff time.
I support user fees. I don't think the city as a whole should be subsidizing the sales of houses. Like I said, I think when you consider somebody who's buying and flipping dozens of houses a year, like that, if we were to quantify that with whatever the high end of your report was, that could add up. And I don't think it should fall on the burden of the taxpayers to support that. So I do support a fee, but I would like to see maybe like that tiered approach, like you said, for those responsible communities that have already set out to be a fire-wise community and protect that ingress and egress, like you said in that report on July 15th.
These inspections are required to be done by the fire department?
Well, it's not, that's what we're recommending, is we continue to facilitate these unless we need to come back to you for a different direction if it becomes too burdensome for the fire department to facilitate with our frontline paramedic engines. So the frequency right now has been about one a week. So, I mean, who knows what the future holds, but that's sustainable for us. If it becomes
more than that, right?
More than that, then we might have to come back and come up with a different plan.
So the whole purpose of us considering this is because AB 38 allows us to require a fee to be paid out of escrow to the city in order to help pay for paramedics and fire?
Just to offset the cost of the inspection itself, that's it.
Requires us to do the inspection. Now, whether we seek reimbursement for the extra staff time for that is your decision.
Huh.
Interesting. Would you say that if you were to be, I'm not sure what member of your staff is doing these inspections, but if they were to go to that community in Wildwood Canyon, that the inspection time would be less burdensome on a community that's already been?
100%, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're already meeting essentially that's their goal, is to meet the defensible space standards, which is what the inspection's held to, which is the same thing we do in the the SRA for CAL FIRE for hardening of entire communities.
And how much of our community is in that very high area?
We're trying to pull with CAD, and we had a
very rough patch there in our command center with COVID. So anything besides 911 calls is kind of the back burner right now, but I'm getting that report pulled off the CAD layers for high and very high fire hazard. You can go to you can Google CAL FIRE higher severity zones and it'll give you a good ballpark, but there's thousands.
Okay.
As I remembered when I worked in the San Bernardino unit, I think almost all of Yucaipa was either high or very high.
The center of the city is moderate when they've kind of reclassed the zones as moderate. So it's really just
It's just the
our
outline areas, the
outside
Crafton
edge.
Hills, the North Bench, Wildwood Canyon, even part of
down
the
by
Freeway
San Tim,
corridor, all that was high. And then as you get towards the North Bench, it became very high.
Correct. That's a good approximation.
Well, I know I keep reverting back to the realtors, but I think that would be something they'd want to support because it does protect them in the long run.
I know
they are
I
liable.
know we've educated them on the requirement because they have to do it whether they like it or not. But I haven't heard much feedback. But we can definitely, if approved, we can bring that back with the implementation.
Okay.
And then paramedic user fees. So the principal rationale for paramedic fees that the services rendered by the Yucaipa Fire Department have greatly expanded well beyond the traditional fire suppression generally supported by property taxes. The change in balance from primarily fire suppression to advanced life support emergency medical services has shifted the rationale for financing fire department operations from primarily property-related taxes to a combination of property taxes, assessment, and user fees. As our department has transitioned to provide trained staff for both fire suppression and medical services, an ever-expanding call volume, there have been no additional taxes or increases in our budget to absorb the cost to provide these services. This is primarily due to a failed Measure E in 2020 and our primary paramedic funding source, Measure Y, having no built-in funding escalator. As it currently stands, the paramedic budget is upside down over $800,000 annually. This potential cost recovery mechanism would be aimed at paramedic services directly. Not all cities have paramedics. As we do here in the city of Yucaipa. This enhanced level of service protects our community to a great degree and is now deemed an essential service. Our current level of service is also in need of expansion as we speak. Our call volume has steadily risen since the city incorporated. While I do need a little bit more time just because we're in January to validate our logbooks, make sure they're 100% valid before I give you exact totals, but we ran over 8,300 calls for service in 2021 with a response time of just over 7 minutes. A 7-minute response time for fire and paramedic service is above industry standard and our own internal standard of 5 minutes, which was established recommendation from our Citygate Fire Department Strategic Review. We were over the 7-minute response threshold in 2007, and this was reduced immediately to the sub 5-minute mark when we opened Station 3, which was 15 years ago. This was the last enhancement to frontline level service for our paramedics. While there are many options for potential funding sources, such as paramedic assessment, a sales tax, a utility tax, tax measure, or a paramedic or first responder fee, paramedic fees or first responder fees, as a lot of folks call them, have become an industry standard among cities nationally and within California who have the same response capability to help offset the cost of their enhanced paramedic level of service provided by their fire engine companies. The intent of a potential paramedic fee would be to cover costs for actual services rendered by the Yucaipa Fire Department paramedics during emergency medical services, as well as the associated equipment and supplies that are not currently being funded by the Fire Department property tax allocation and Measure Y funding sources. The potential fee could be applied to residents and non-residents at tiered user rates as established by council. As we polled other municipalities who were successfully instituting first responder fees, it was found that an insurance-based compassionate billing was by far the most successful politically and financially. What this would mean is that when our paramedics services rendered by our firefighters, a first responder fee would be charged to the patient's insurance company and not to the patient directly. If the insurance company pays the full fee, a partial fee, or doesn't pay the bill, it never becomes the responsibility of the patient. The fee billing would be carried out by a third-party provider under contract. While there is currently no state or federal mandate to make these fees payable, the municipalities we polled have about a 30% recovery rate. And further feedback from them was that the insurance providers in discussions have stated that pre-hospital care by advanced life support providers is a critical component of their healthcare system. Currently, Medicare at the federal level does not reimburse first responder fees, but it's highly anticipated that there will be updated language shortly with the ET3, or Emergency Triage, Treat, and Transport, allowing Medicare reimbursement, which would greatly increase potential recovery rates. When municipalities employed an uncompassionate model where they billed every citizen directly and then the citizen had to apply through their insurance, otherwise they pursued collections, these programs proved to be very unsuccessful. They only recovered an additional 8 to 10% over that 30%, and pretty much lost all public support as a potential funding source. The cities that did employ this uncompassionate billing have since ceased their programs and started compassionate billing and are now a success. We also polled cities who employed paramedic fees strictly for non-residents. Non-residents who utilize their paramedic service without providing any funding to these programs have proved unsuccessful. A good example, the Redlands Fire Chief expressed to me that over the last 12 months, the revenue for that option of non-resident only is not covering the increased staff costs and administrative costs with a third-party billing agency. They essentially broke even for doing a year's worth of work on it. Another option, if we progress down this road, that some entities employed was the option of a subscription service, as Mayor Avila pointed out. You could opt into a Ems Subscription for a flat rate per calendar year, regardless of how many times you utilized 911 or the paramedics. If the council would like to pursue paramedic fees as a potential funding source, staff would recommend we return to council a proposal to hire a professional financial consultant that could generate a comprehensive study identifying the feasibility of the program, financial impacts, and establish paramedic user fee rates. With the multitude of options and nuances to the potential funding source, staff also recommends the council direct the Public Safety Committee or their designee to form a working group to keep the project in line with the vision of the council. This proposal was presented January 13th to Public Safety Ad Hoc Committee, who approved and recommended it be moved to full council for review. This concludes my report. Actually, would like to add one thing. So as we looked into these other cities, any city that provided full service, full-time fire and paramedic service, we couldn't find any city that had just a property tax allocation. At this point, every municipality we could find had a multi-tiered funding source for their fire department and paramedics, whether it was a utility tax or some other kind of alternative funding. We couldn't find one that had strictly property tax allocation. So for your advisement, but that concludes my report. I'm available for any questions.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification, this would be to make up the difference, not, of course, the entire cost, but the difference between the annual assessment cost and the annual assessment revenue and the annual cost of the program. So,
And currently, we're paying what? It's more, is it more than 48 now? What is the annual cost?
For Measure Y?
Yeah.
52.
52.
Yeah, 52 for residential.
Okay.
That's what's on the tax bill is 52?
Yes, sir.
Seems like mine was higher than that.
I've never heard the term compassionate and uncompassionate billing.
Tyler Gentler Fire Department.
What's that?
Tyler Gentler Fire Department.
Any
Yes,
comments or questions?
This will be aimed at
Additional.
covering that deficit only, not as a revenue producer or anything.
And these would be only paramedic calls.
Correct, which is the bulk of what we do.
Sure.
I mean, I'd have to pull stats, but we run about 75% to 80% on the paramedic service or paramedics on fire scenarios.
So, but the cat stuck in a tree is not going to get billed for anything.
No, we don't. We leave that to law enforcement.
Yeah.
You walked in.
Okay, we'll wake you up at 2 in the morning to come
We're
out, sir.
we're all risk full service. If you call us, we will come out.
Clever.
I think as it relates to, I support the compassionate billing. I think that's the way for us to go and push that burden on the insurance companies that are providing medical insurance for our constituents. I think the more involved this becomes with money and where Mr. Hamilton comes in for reports, I'm thinking that maybe all discussions as it relates to this portion of fire should actually be taken out of the Public Safety Committee and put into finance. I think public safety should focus on more about strategy for providing public safety. And all manner of billing should be focused into the finance committee so that the man who brought the calculator to the council meeting should be privy to all of this discussion before it comes to full council. Or Mr. Hamilton should be part of the public safety committee from here on out as we discuss these matters, so that we can make informed decisions.
Make this subject matter specialist, if you will.
There you go.
But I think it's all interrelated, and what I was gonna bring up, and I've always been a supporter of the fire and public safety in our city, but you know, we went through the sales tax increase, and that was shot down. It was, I don't even know what the returns were, but it wasn't good. So I kind of take that as, besides of just looking for ways to enhance revenue, maybe the community is looking at maybe some structural changes. I don't know, is there anything that proposals out there that we could do to perhaps save money on that end? I know we've seen something in the future. I've seen something in the past. I don't know, I know we were talking about changing one of the fire stations to paramedics. And
Yeah,
we were talking about savings on there. I just like to see it all as one comprehensive thing instead of just saying, oh, you know, we're looking for money here, but maybe there are some things we could do differently that would save.
I think the reality is we need to expand level of service and any, like all the proposals we brought, and we have brought several, we've you know, white papered out, and anything would essentially be detrimental to the level of service we provide.
Well, here's a question. I'm not a fireman. I don't know anything about the fire department. So I know that at each paramedic call, we're running a big truck to every one of those service calls. Is there a smaller vehicle or something that would minimize the cost? Instead of running a giant fire engine to each call, we could run a.
But that would our bare minimum staffing right now, just for fire department capability, not on the paramedic side, necessitates 3 pumping units. And actually, the Citygate study shows 4 is where we should actually recommend it be at. So if we were to do that, that is kind of the recommendation moving forward. If we can fix our budget and move forward and increase our level of service, the next unit would be the 4th. One additional unit would be a paramedic squad. So we'd be advocating for that cheaper, more mission-focused paramedic unit as we grow with these calls. Yeah. So, but that would not help us in our current situation to lower our level of service to something like that. It would help us financially, but it would be detrimental to fire and paramedic services. Well, not necessarily paramedic, but would it be detrimental to fire services?
So you still have to have 3-0 staffing and a paramedic squad, which will have a minimum of 1 paramedic and 1 EMT. So it's actually going to cost more because you're adding a unit and you have to staff it.
And that's where we're at right now. We're 8,300 calls. We're getting busier. Every year in perpetuity, we're getting busier. And our response times are reflecting that call volume. It's never, the only year it's ever backtracked was 2020 with COVID, when people were scared of, more scared of us in the hospitals than they were welcoming the help. And we've already exceeded those 2019 levels, which was our highest year ever. So 2021 was our highest level of service ever.
And I'd like to remind council that as we build our hotel and another one coming in, we're going to have to entertain the notion of purchasing a truck company, and that's a minimum of 4 staffing. So no matter what happens, maybe we can, if we can find a way to reduce the engine companies to something different, we're still going to have to add equipment to meet the needs of the higher-rise commercial, mid-rise, I guess. I don't think we have any high-rise, but mid-rise commercial developments, and any future distribution centers or any other big box stores that may come into town.
We have more wide rises than high rises, yeah, correct.
So today I had a conversation with Mr. Casey about this, and he mentioned Canyon Lake. I called Jeremy Smith and Chris Mann and discussed the subscription proposal, and they're having really good luck recovering a lot of their costs. Can we do both of these? Can we do the AB 38 sort of thing and also the subscription?
You can make a separate decision on each one and choose to do both or either one, absolutely. And you can do a fee with a subscription option, where, the fee, again, would cover half of the cost, plus or minus, in today's dollars, and pay a subscription that would cover you for the whole year for no matter how many calls you might have, which is what Canyon Lake has adopted. They don't have an assessment, so it's all a fee or a subscription.
May I add something? Canyon Lake is also a gated community that incorporated to protect themselves from Paris and Lake Elsinore back whenever they incorporated. It's an upscale community overall. And so people are more likely to have the discretionary funds to get into a subscription service. In Yucaipa here, we have 42 mobile home parks, and at least half of them, Jennifer, and correct me if I'm wrong, are rent controlled, which means we have a lot of economically depressed citizens. And it would be hard pressed to get them to enter into a subscription service if they can barely meet the needs of their day-to-day lives. But, and also, going back where I faux pas the item before, I talked to the mayor of Montclair, and they have a volunteer subscription service, which according to him, to the best of his knowledge, hasn't been very, very receptive. In fact, he believes that they've just kind of let it go away because it just wasn't working.
They employ a user fee, and I think where Canyon Lakes may be successful is their user fee is very high, to the tune of like $1,400, and their subscription is a fifth of that, whereas Montclair is more an appropriate user fee if they had a subscription or not, so it doesn't really make sense on that one. But that's where I think a working group would be helpful, because there's so many just options, and there's a lot of success stories out there, especially with the insurance billing. We're not putting this on the backs of the citizens, but on the insurance company, who we are essentially helping provide service for their patients who are our patients.
And I think it might be good to see, maybe come back with those, more information, with more specific information from the various cities who have success stories, and weigh them against Yucaipa's economic, because Canyon Lake is different than Paris, is different than Lake, Yucaipa, different than Highland. So I'd like to see what the balance is and what's successful and why.
Would you be billing insurance companies that rate, or would it be dependent on the level of service provided by your paramedics? A first-time mom who gets nervous because her baby choked up a little bit, versus somebody who's trapped in a car, multiple fractures, and you're having to quantify how much equipment was used, how much time did your paramedic go in the ambulance to Redlands? I mean, what would it be?
My impression from the programs that are out there, and I'm not saying we can't do either option there, is they hired a financial consultant, and they came up with, like, here's the actual cost you're not recovering with your current funding sources, and that's essentially prorated to a flat rate for calls for service.
Comparatively, I think, is it like AMR bills for every piece of equipment?
Itemized billing. Yeah.
Okay.
There's flat rates in there, but flat rate ALO service, but oxygen and mileage and blah, 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 blah. I think every entity we looked at was essentially a flat rate.
Okay.
And those were, don't quote me, because they all have their own finances and studies and everything, but they were in about the $250 range for service that goes billed to the insurance.
I think when you come back, I think maybe have somebody from AMR's accounts receivable here telling us what their success rate is as it relates to receiving their payments from insurance companies, maybe specific to Yucaipa, because I know, I think, and forgive me, I was trying to think of a few steps ahead, so I think I missed part of your presentation, but when you mentioned the different types of like Medi-Cal or Medicare not covering certain things, perhaps a large populace of our community might be on some state-funded Medi-Cal, Medicare, something like that, and would they not be paying, would that insurance not be paying this bill? I think it might be prudent to have somebody who's actively billing insurance companies within Yucaipa's response area, telling us what their accounts receivable is receiving from these insurance companies.
Well, Ray, Grant, you said that you get a 30% recovery rate. Where did that number come from?
The actual, I'm drawing a blank on their name right now, but we talked to who does our civil cost recovery on the fire side. They do EMS billing, and then we talked to Witten, don't quote, I think it's Witten Enterprises, and they're the largest user, like paramedic user fee in the nation, and that's where we got that rate. And they're like the number one name in the business, so they give us pretty valid data.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Grant, but transport services would be covered under Medicare and
Yeah, those are
pre-transport, maybe not.
required to pay by insurance, so it wouldn't really be a like-for-like model.
So then, Mike, okay, so then transitive property, if you're prepping somebody for transport, that's transport. I gotta get you ready to get in the ambulance, bill that the same way as transport. I mean, I would assume, right? Maybe. Creative language.
Yeah.
Transport is covered, then me preparing you for transport, laws of transitive property, you gotta be covered.
That's why they're first responder fees, yeah, we're stabilizing for transport and seeking to recover our actual cost incurred.
Bigger part of transport, so you gotta call it a transport fee.
I was surprised to hear that's 30%. I thought since the Affordable Care Act came into place, the recovery rate for private ambulances such as AMR went up to almost 60%.
But there's no language for Medicare yet, but it's anticipated that is going to change with that ET3. So we're anticipating federal reimbursement as they will do it. So those would be essentially a for sure on Medicare. So Medi-Cal has been paying from talking to the billing agencies and other departments. Medi-Cal, the only one for sure out there that's not is Medicare, but it's anticipated that is gonna, Medicare and Plan B would reimburse those.
Okay.
Because there is a lot of that GEMT and all the federal funding changes with transport and first responders.
Good answers. All right, gentlemen.
Do we need a vote, or is it just direction?
Just a
Just
study
give
session,
direction.
right?
Yeah, just concurrence to come back to you with both additional information on the second, the paramedic fee / subscription. The first, I think what I heard concurrence on is to go forward with the proposal. So probably a two-step process for the second and maybe a one-step process for the first, AB 38. Well, including conversations with the real estate group.
Yeah, I want to see something from the realtors themselves.
Good presentation, Chief, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. That was number 18. We'll move on.
Did we get concurrence just to make sure? I'm sorry.
Yeah, did we? I think so.
Yeah,
Right.
that's-
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to announcements. Are there any announcements to make? Okay, I think we're on the last days, and correct me if I'm wrong, with the Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And I'm surprised that Grace Point Church didn't come in to remind us. But this is a big issue, and it's not getting any better. And so we need to do whatever it takes to support finding ways to fight back and eliminate this human trafficking thing. It's just devastating when you hear the stories and see the examples that's out there. I'm sure maybe our law enforcement officers have experience in having to deal with that.
I worked that desk for 3 years. It's a very tragic circumstance. So anything anybody can do to bring awareness to it, support law enforcement in their fights to end human trafficking is all paramount.
All right, anything else?
Just that the legislature is back in session, so beware. Keep your eyes and
Put
ears
your helmet on,
open.
because the shelling's starting to begin.
I wanted to, real quick, thank Captain Williams and your staff for the work you did out there on 6th Street as it relates to the public comment from the last meeting and their concerns. I'm not sure if there's a press release coming from that's going to go citywide, but if there is, maybe something we can put out, because it made it to the council for requests for attention, and I know you guys did a lot of work out there to do that, so maybe a specific press release to the community that can address those concerns. But thank you.
All right, if nothing further, Mr. Snow, do we have a closed session item?
We do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We've got one item this evening. It's conference with legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation. It's a liability claim number 2021-06 from Mark Salceda, and we do expect reportable action on that item this evening.
Okay, thank you very much for tonight's meeting. We'll go ahead and adjourn the public meeting and move to closed council. Thank you very much.